I got a dream, comes from the heart of the heartland. I can make my dream, cause I take my dream right from the heart of the heartland. Got it all here in my hand. Wherever I go, I'm gonna let all know it's coming right from the heart of the heartland. Right from the heart of the heartland.
Is what he's got. He's got less than 30 seconds to go to make it. The clock is in sight.
Salazar and Beardsley's closing. Al's running it.
Anything nothing for Los Angeles. They're going for the win. They're going for the win.
Not far to go now. Sal's trying to go by. What a race.
Incredible athletic performances. Got 30 seconds left for world record performance.
The Road Race of the Month, presented by Foot Locker, America's most complete athletic footwear store. The summer's heat is arriving late in the great Northwest, but the heat is sure to be felt full force on the roads as the City of Roses plays host to the Road Race of the Month. There's Kenya's Ibrahim Hussein, New York City and Boston Marathon champion. Steve Spence of Pennsylvania, training in Boulder, Colorado, runner-up in last month's Bloomsday 12K in Spokane. Aurora Cunha of Portugal, two-time world champion at 15K on the roads. There's Utah's Ed Eyestone. He's got the fastest 10K track time in the nation so far in '89. Number 4, Rolando VERA of Ecuador, the '87 Cascade runoff champion. An apprehension written all over the face of Lisa Whitenbach of Washington, the American record holder at 15K. One of the favorites in the race, Alejandro Cruz of Mexico, the national Mexican record holder in the marathon. So we're just about ready for the 1989 Cascade runoff 15K.
There goes the start, the 12th annual Cascade runoff.
$15K of racing at its best after this.
It's overcast and there's a little bit of a light drizzle, so I think it's pretty close to ideal conditions.
There we see our dense early lead pack, and they're going slightly uphill, but this first mile is really the flattest part of the course. There's John Sinclair and Ed Eyestone, two top Americans. We spoke with Eyestone about the strategy on this course.
Well, obviously you have to hang with whoever pushes the pace early going up the hills, because if you let anyone get away from you going up the hills, they're just going to have so much that they put on you once they start going downhill and you're still going up the hill, that there's going to be no chance of catching them. And so I think you've got to basically hang, be tough going up the hills, and then, you know, let it all hang out going down that hill. I need a win. I need a win here.
Eyestone's been second in his last 3 races, beaten just last weekend by Ibrahim Hussein in Middletown, New York.
First 5 miles of this course are all uphill, and I think that most of the runners here are going to have the strategy of wanting to expend as little energy as possible. I've always felt that it's impossible to win a race in the uphills. All you can do is lose the race in the uphills. The more energy you put into fighting a hill, the more it's going to take out of you. So I think most of these runners are going to just try and stay with the lead pack, try and make it as easy as possible, and then once they start coming down the backside, once they're running downhill, that's when you start seeing them try and pull away.
It's a course which essentially requires strength but rewards speed at the end. Hussein in the lead. In the Reebok colors, red, white, blue, right in the middle of your screen, Marcus Barreto from Mexico, the national record holder from his country at 15 kilometers. A who's who, really, of the running world.
running his
hill. Here's our first mile split. 10 seconds off record pace, but remember, in the old days, they used to go out a lot faster and then die a little bit at the end. Nowadays in road racing, it's more of an even pace the whole way.
It's incredible when you think of it that for 9.3 miles, they are going to average somewhere close to 4:33 per mile. That's a fast time on the track, let alone going up these steep hills and then down the hills on the other side.
Still 20, 25 guys in that lead pack. There's no one real favorite in the race today. No one horse out there. There's 19 nations represented, 10 Mexicans, 4 Ecuadorians, 3 Colombians, 9 New Zealanders. Al, that tells me all these guys train on hills and train at altitude. Perfect for this course.
The combination of training at altitude and training on hills is the most strenuous form of distance running that you can do. So for these runners to come and run on these hills here is probably a lot easier than what they're used to back at home.
Going down just a little bit, but don't be deceived. They're going to go screaming uphill or screaming uphill. Talking about screaming, there is Alejandro Cruz, number 7 from Mexico, the winner of the Chicago Marathon last year, second this April at the Rotterdam Marathon. Leonardo Reyes, number 26, his countryman, and John Sinclair coming right along with him. We know that Cruz is a very strong uphill runner, probably the strongest uphill runner in the field, and he's going to push hard all the way through the 5-mile mark because that's to his best advantage. Here we see downtown Southwest Broadway's the street, and 7,500 runners strung out in the first. From Ecuador, the 2 strong hill runners doing the point work, doing all the pushing. And it's begun to rain on Terwilliger, and rain hard. Rolando Vera's Cascade victory was his first major U.S. win. He went on to win the Falmouth Road Race later that year, had a great 87 season.
At 5 kilometers, the runners are 15:04. That's a pace of about 4:50 per mile. From here to the finish, though, it'll pick up dramatically. So probably run somewhere around 4:25 per mile. Cruz, prior to the race, said that he was going to press the pace whenever they hit any flat or downhill sections. Apparently, he's doing that right now.
Back in town before Terwilliger, it hasn't begun to rain yet, which is typical Northwest weather. We'll probably go through sunshine and rain about 3 times. The whole pack's been broken up. We talked to Cruz about his best chances to win today.
Alejandro is saying that if it's possible, he'd like to pull away early. If it isn't, they'll have to concentrate on his finishing kick. Preferably, he'll try and escape from the rest of the runners somewhere in the middle parts of the race.
As the rain just continues to pour out of the sky, the only problem with the Cruz strategy is that Vera's got the same playbook. The only guy that's still potentially in it, I think, is Steve Spence. He's the speed buy in that crowd. Ice Stone and Garcia in 4th and 5th place. But Cruz, cruising. As they're past the top of Terwilliger, and now, even though there's a few rollers, most of the uphill's over.
Here's a good shot of Ed Eyestone using that downhill to his advantage. As you can see, he's got a nice forward lean. He's not braking, landing back on his heels. He's letting that hill work to his advantage.
Still in town, the masses have considering it's uphill. In stark contrast to the women working uphill and the boys hammering the downs. With Steve Spence trying to reattach himself to the Vera Cruz assault team up front. Cascade 89 continues in a minute.
He thinks that will be a very big advantage for him because he trains at altitude, especially an advantage when he comes down to sea level to race.
Well, the key is to be relaxed going up the hill so that you can make a response at the top. As soon as we get to the top of the hill, you'll be able to tell who's going to win. If someone responds to the initial surge at the top, then they have a chance to win. If you can't respond at the top, there's no way to come back.
Spence has responded beautifully so far, never once challenging Cruz and Vera on the hills, and now, as they head downtown for the last 3.5 miles, he's got himself in position. Alberto, form check time.
We've got a real contrast in styles here. We have Cruz with a traditional marathon runner style, sitting back a little bit, landing back on his heels. We've got Spence, more the orthodox track runner, running very smooth and easy, bouncing along, up on his toes. And then we've got Vera, a mixture of the two, having to really turn his arms and legs over much harder and faster than the others because of his shorter height.
Look at Cruz, Alberto. He's got no back kick whatsoever. Almost looks like he's very tight, whereas Spence, I mean, he's sitting so pretty. I mean, sitting back on it. Oh, he just stumbled a little bit going around that turn, but that is the last turn on the course. It's 3.5 miles or so to the finish line from this point. But Spence looks like he can sort of sit down and drive anytime he wants. He's like dialed in.
One of the keys to watch for here is the arm swing. As you can see, Spence is hardly moving his arms at all, whereas the other two are pumping their arms much faster. That means when it comes down to a final kick, usually the runner who could still swing his arms harder than he has been is going to be able to turn his legs over faster as well.
And right with Aurora Cunha behind Lisa Weidenbach, the tall gentleman in exactly the same Portuguese colors, Joaquim Mesquita, who is Aurora Cunha's husband. We might have like a traditional pacing problem going on here right now. We'll have to let that play out a little bit. Right now, Weidenbach does have the lead and is extending it ever so slightly as she's still on Terwilliger. And if the rain is going to affect anyone positively, it's going to be Lisa Weidenbach. In 1980, while she was still a student at the University of Michigan, she was an Olympic trials finalist as a swimmer in the 400-meter individual medley.
Now with just about 2.5 miles to go, we can see that Spence is starting to move up and really position himself for that last drive to the finish.
10K in 29:14, Alberto. That means they average around 4:33 for that second 5K. And right now they're running under 4:20 per mile.
As you can see, it's raining cats and dogs out there, but rain really isn't a factor at this point in the race. It's warm enough that the rain probably isn't tightening up their muscles at all.
Here's the man with the flag. If he unfurls it, he probably can't stay with Lisa Weidenbach. This is as impressive as she has ever been. Issaquah, Washington is her home, and she is not only on course record pace, set back in 1983 by Greta White, but she's beating the likes of Aurora Cunha, two-time world champion at this distance. And there's no doubt that this is pace. Less than a mile to go at the 1989 Cascade Runoff 15K. We've had this same threesome. VERA, Cruz, and Spence since the top of Terwilliger Hill. Now they've got less than 4 minutes of running left, with VERA doing the pushing, Cruz right behind. But Alberto, Spence sitting pretty even after a 4:13 mile. Does he look as good as he looks?
He looks great. Spence has run probably the smartest race of his life up to now. He's let the other two continually hammer away at each other, and he's just sat back there and run a nice even pace. He looks like a cat waiting to pounce.
VERA seems to sense it. Cruz biding his time a little bit. His head is really starting to turn. Cruz has done all the work, Alberto. Is he the one most likely to tire?
He's a strong and experienced runner, so I don't think he's going to tire.
Weidenbach has got the lead. And now we're going under Hawthorne Bridge, the first of the two bridges in this final stretch.